here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the artist, musician, writer and songwriter. It's the one and only Adele Bertei, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has just written another book, this one titled No New York, a memoir of No Wave and the women who shaped the scene. Available from all good bookshops and also online. In the UK, I think it's come out on Faber Books, so there is no excuse not to buy a copy, actually. An amazing read, and this is going to be the interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of, the background to the publication and a little bit of how it all began.
Well, basically the no wave movement, which I accredit to happening probably in late 1976, all the way through to about 1982, maybe. It was short-lived, but it was a very powerful movement, and it was anti-punk, because punk was really about three-chord progressions and, almost a pop paradigm, sometimes with political lyrics, whereas no wave was deconstructing music in absolutely any way we could imagine. So it was, we were being brutal with music, and I think there's been a couple of books written about no wave, one by Mark Masters and another one by Thurston Moore and Byron Coley. And they're all great books, and they all do give credence to the women that were there in that scene. But I thought it was really important as a woman who was involved in that scene to frame it for the powerful movement, the revolutionary movement of women that it was, because women were coming from all over Europe, from the UK and Japan and France and Germany, and then all over America to New York at one moment in time to not only make music, but to make art, to make films, theater, writing. So all of it was happening. It was the first time, really, David, in history where a movement like that of women happened and kind of coagulated into one moment and one place in time. And it needed to be framed in that way because nobody had really framed it before.
Yes.
As that powerful. So I wanted to do that from a diaristic point of view. I mean, there's plenty of room for a more scholarly feminist analysis of it, but that's not me. I'm more of a...
You had sort of come from Cleveland, wasn't it? That was your sort of hometown. So what made you sort of want to sort of leave Cleveland to go to New York?
Well, it was a couple of things. I was planning to move to New York anyway with a gentleman named Peter Lochner, who was one of the driving forces behind underground music in Cleveland. He was the guitar player for Pere Ubu. And he died very young from alcoholism, which was devastating for me. And so I decided I was going to move to New York. And part of everyone in Cleveland who actually moved to New York during that time was inspired by bands like Patti Smith and Television and Richard Hell and Talking Heads and the Ramones and all Suicide, all those bands that were happening in downtown New York at the time. And they were just starting to sign major record label deals. And, we were the next wave of people coming in to disrupt art and music in New York City.
What was the sort of the kind of social and political sort of fabric of New York in sort of, was it 77 that you sort of entered the sort of the city? So what was it like? Because we get an idea that it almost been abandoned and was quite a horrendously sort of wild and unsafe place.
Well, it was kind of like it had been kind of abandoned by the financiers, and what was happening in America, which 1975 really reflected this, is that there was an anxiety in America of hopelessness because we had just gone through Vietnam, We had just gone through Nixon and Watergate and those betrayals. And then Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon. So the country, everyone was filled with so much anxiety. And films in Hollywood were, for the first time, were reflecting that anxiety. Films like Dog Day Afternoon and Network and Taxi Driver were telling the truth about what was happening in the American psyche. That carried over into New York City because New York City was pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy. When I got there in 1977, President Gerald Ford had said, okay, to the city, drop dead were the headlines. They didn't care about New York. Everyone with money had abandoned it. So we were left with this junkyard of rubble. I mean, it looked like Dresden after World War II.
Right.
And we got there and we were able to rent apartments for $60 a month, I mean, they were tenement apartments with bathtubs in the kitchen and bars on the windows. And I mean, it wasn't glamorous, that's for sure. But there was such a freedom in coming into this junkyard and knowing that we had the complete freedom to reinvent ourselves and reinvent downtown New York in any way that we saw fit.
Yes. And did you manage to sort of find your people quite quickly? Because from sort of looking and reading through the book, you seem to sort of be able to sort of get in touch with sort of like directors, like, is it Nan Goldin that you sort of met up with, and then sort of Lester Bangs? So it sort of just seemed like the script was very well sort of written at this stage. That was it quite easy to form your community at this point?
It was, in a sense. I mean, I had visited New York once before I moved there, and knew the drummer in Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, which I thought was the best punk band name that you could ever imagine. But it was actually the beginning of No Wave because Lydia Lunch was the lead singer of Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. So I immediately met Lydia when I got to New York, and all of the no wave misfits were starting to play music at clubs like CBGBs in Maxis, Kansas City, and at some of the art spaces. So we all kind of, I like to think of it as maybe there were roughly 200 people downtown that were all there. Some were from academia, some were working class, and it didn't really matter. People didn't think in terms of identity politics. We were all kind of cross collaborating, and we were all kind of fighting against the commodifications of the system. And it was very easy to meet people. You'd go to a club, and we didn't have the internet, of course. We didn't have cell phones. So
No.
you go to a club, and someone would say, "Hey, this is happening over at Max's. So let's go over there." And so it was just this kind of very organic meeting people in the streets and going to one event or another, and all starting to make music together and films together. It was really quite a vibrant cross collaborative scene, and it was very, very exciting.
Yes. I mean, looking back at those times, do you sort of think how did you survive it, and B, the amount of creativity that happened with so little kind of resource and sort of access to things? Because it does seem quite extraordinary how much got created out of New York during that period. You had almost the birth of punk, disco, and rap music came out of this city on such a shoestring, and yet sort of amazing amount of creativity.
Yeah, well, hip hop, we started to hear about hip hop in the early 80s, and there was a lot of graffiti happening. Of course, there was Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was part of the no wave scene. And when hip hop started to cross over into the little galleries that were popping up all over the Lower East Side and storefronts and things, that blended so well with no wave and punk, because hip hop was revolutionary. They were talking, it was street poetry. It was like agitprop poetry. So
Yes.
that was really exciting. But what happened was the people with money and the art elite started to hear the buzz of what was going on downtown. And that was kind of the beginning of gentrification, when they started discovering the galleries and the brilliant art that was being made. And then the world that the outlaw artists had built from the junkyard was then commodified by the people with money, by the corporations, which was sad. I mean, it kind of started to end in the 80s, but it was a kind of a combination of money and AIDS, which really decimated the community as well.
Yes, and the drug culture, was that very
yes,
prevalent as well? Did you had you already started taking drugs before New York, or was it in New York that things started to get quite difficult?
Well, well, I'd always experimented a bit with drugs, and I mean, alcohol was my main thing. I loved alcohol, and that kind of sustained me throughout all the experimentations with the brief experimentations with drugs. But there was a time, and it was probably around 77, when suddenly the whole Lower East Side and the East Village was flooded with heroin. I mean, flooded. You couldn't swing a dead cat and not hit a dealer. And this is something that also happened during the Harlem Renaissance, and it happened to Black culture in New York City when things were becoming extremely revolutionary and creative. The same thing happened. Heroin flooded the neighborhood. I believe in conspiracies as being truth. This wasn't a conspiracy. I mean, it's written about that the CIA, employed these tactics to silence movements that were antithetical to, corporate rule.
Yes.
So yes, it was a very dangerous time for heroin. It was very seductive. A lot of people fell prey to it. I experimented with it a bit, but I found it to be extremely dark. And thankfully never became addicted to heroin.
Yes.
But I did almost die of an overdose on heroin once.
Yes.
So I think in a lot of ways the book is also a cautionary tale for young people.
Oh my God! I mean, the when you talk about AIDS, it's sort of those stories and that time sort of comes back, as well as the drugs, but also the characters. I mean, you did seem to be able to sort of meet just about all the main players in New York at that time, didn't you? Sort of from Sid and Nancy to Lester Bangs to James Chance, Lydia Lunch. I mean, it was and Lizzie as well. I mean, there was just endless people that I kept thinking, oh God, you did meet them as well. That was just. Did you sort of going back and sort of writing the book? Did you sort of think? You certainly were able to sort of tap into the zeitgeist that was going on at that point.
Well, most of the people that I do write about, I either collaborated with on projects or was very close to friend-wise. And a lot of them I wanted to honor in the book in ways that they hadn't been written about before, in a very personal or more of a tender way, because there are so many more academic accounts of movements like this, and they tend to be very dry and unemotional. And these were human beings that took so many risks and were incredibly brave people, artistically, personally. And I really wanted to express that part of the people that I knew, that influenced me, that I cared for, why they inspired me, what it was about them.
And was that Janet Hamill that you mentioned? She was your sort of mentor. This was 77. So how did you meet Janet?
I met Janet. I'm trying to remember how I met Janet. I think it might have been through. She worked at a bookstore called Cinemabilia, and I was working at a bookstore called The Strand. And I used to go into Cinemabilia, and I had read some of her poetry somewhere, and I introduced myself, and we became friends. I believe it was through the bookstore connections that we met.
And then because you then mentioned you did your first public reading with Janet in 78. So was this quite a big moment for you?
It was a huge moment because I had always kind of been in the closet about writing. I always thought of it as something that I still to this day feel like a poseur when I call myself a poet. There's just something about it, just feels so lofty and of an ambition for me to talk about myself that way. But Janet gave me the courage to start writing, and she really believed in me as a poet. And so it was a huge deal for me to do my first reading with her. And
Yes.
I think she's just so overlooked, which is another reason why I wanted to write about her in the book, because she's always kind of been in the shadow of Patti Smith, because she was very close with Patti Smith. They went to college together. They were friends in Jersey. I think they moved to New York together as well. And I always thought that Patti never gave her due. She's helped her in some ways, but she's never really pushed her forward in the way that Janet is a mystical, brilliant, brilliant poet. So I was really happy to be able to write about her.
Did you bump into Penny Arcade at that stage?
I didn't know Penny back then. Penny was more in the Warhol set.
Yes.
And then we were like post Warhol, so it was a kind of a slightly different crowd with some crossovers. But I met Penny much later, and I adore Penny. I think she's another just brilliant.
Well, yes, there was just a lot of amazing performers actually at that stage, wasn't there?
Yes,
so were people like the Mumps, were they New York or LA then, Lance Loud?
Oh, the Mumps were very much a New York phenomenon. I think they played here in LA. I'm sure they traveled out here to perform.
So were you bumping into people like Klaus Nomi?
Klaus Nomi.
Yes, or Joey Aria. Were they also on your sort of radar at that stage?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Klaus was I used to go and see Klaus all the time. What a genius. Yes. And Joey was always, everybody kind of crossed over. Like there was Club 57. Club 57 was probably the gayest of all the clubs. A lot of gay women and men hung out at Club 57. Well, but at the same time, people weren't so strict about sexual identities then too. People were a lot more fluid. You knew if people were gay or not, or but there was a kind of a fluidity, a bisexuality to people that they didn't feel like they had to kind of commodify their sexuality. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, don't limit your options in life. I guess. But was Studio 54 kind of another world as well of sort of sexuality and cocaine? Was that sort of part of your scene as well at certain times?
We actually used to laugh about Studio 54. I mean, I remember a few of us going up there once. It was James, I think it was Pat Place, and I. We went to Studio 54, and because of the way we looked, because we were so severe, practically shaved heads and flea-bitten suits, and we.
You weren't going to get in, were you?
They weren't going to let us in if we hadn't had some kind of an aura of downtown mystique, which we had, and they knew it, so they let us in. And we would go in, and we were so flabbergasted by what we saw, because people were dressed in Halston and dripping with cocaine. And, there was a lot of celebrities and disco music. There was something about disco music that the Contortions despised.
Right.
Yet at the same time, which is very ironic, as I was leaving the band, they were just about to make their first disco record, which was James White and the Blacks for Z Records.
Right.
So it was kind of a combination of disco dance floor beats with the cacophony of no wave noise on top of it.
Yes. When you were doing the book, were you quite fascinated with the sort of New York music scene compared to, say, the UK, where punk sort of became quite limited in its kind of musicality, whereas the sort of punk and no wave scene in New York just seemed to be much more out there and much more sort of experimental, much more avant-garde. There was jazz, there was world music, there's all sorts of stuff going on in the soundscape. We had Sham 69. It was not so sophisticated, was it? You knew punk was, and everyone wanted to be a Sid lookalike, which was like, oh, I'm not sure. This isn't going terribly well, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the differences as more about the like in New York, people were also making films and writing and um, making visual art, which was not associated with punk in the UK. Although one of the I think one of the best I call them no wave bands of that era were the Slits.
Yes.
The Slits were amazing because they were, taking noise and reggae rhythms, and they were doing what we were doing basically in New York, is mixing up genres and being also political.
Yes,
So,
there was
so
kind of a couple of years ago. I did an interview with someone who made a film, Make Me Famous, which was about an artist, Edward Brzezinski. Brzezinski. Did you ever come across Edward at all? He was just one of these
no,
people that obviously was in New York and wanted to be famous, and then he just disappears. They make a film trying to sort of locate what happened to him, and it just sounded like there was a lot of people making art in New York at that time, and some made it famous and some didn't actually.
yes.
So that's good. But then, interesting enough, people like Brian Eno, who had been in Roxy Music, also kind of appears in the New York scene. So how did he
Mm.
sort of come into your sort of world, or sort of the community, sort of, because he put together a compilation, which is quite a fascinating sort of piece of what music was happening in that particular period.
Yes. Well, Brian had been coming off of producing one of the Talking Heads LPs. I can't remember which, but he had also finished some of the Berlin trilogy with Bowie, which was extremely experimental. And when he arrived in New York, it was kind of the heyday of the beginning of no wave music downtown. And he had come to the Mud Club because the Mud Club was one of the premier spots for the crossover of celebrities and no wave and punk. And that was the club to go to at the time. So the owner uh, was a friend of his, and they got together and said, I need an assistant. So Steve, the owner,
Was
recommended
that
me, and
Steve Mass?
yeah, and I ended up working with Brian as a personal assistant for a bit. And I told him about No Wave, and we discussed it. And I told him about the artist space gigs that we were going to be doing, which was a series of all the No Wave downtown bands. And he came to every show and was just, God, I hate to say enamored because I don't know if he really loved it, but he was definitely fascinated by it, which ended up being, the production he did of the LP No New York.
Yes, that's amazing. There's a lovely piece in the book where he gives you $100 in an envelope, and you sort of say, "That's a lot of money for a feral girl." Did you?
Yes, yes.
Yes, did that feel quite surreal that you were sort of suddenly in this world with someone like Brian, who we saw on Top of the Pops with his amazing outfits doing those classic Roxy albums?
Mm. It didn't feel unusual, really. I mean, I think one of the things about No Wave is that we didn't have disdain for celebrities, but we didn't treat them like we were in awe of them or that they were just someone to tiptoe around. They were artists that we admired, but it didn't feel unusual because we would be in the Mud Club and standing next to Marianne Faithfull, or so a lot of celebrities were mixing it up with the denizens of downtown at the time, and they felt comfortable to do so because we did not treat them like, oh, can we take your picture, or oh, can we have your autograph? There was none of that. So it felt more natural. I mean, yes, honestly, I was a bit intimidated when I met him because, he was Brian Eno, Roxy Music. But I also had this very tough veneer that, I could handle anything.
Yes.
And
Did you get to see Bowie in '78 then at times? You mentioned he was at Madison Square Garden. Was that a concert you managed to get to?
I did not get to that concert. I'm sure he was at the Mud Club one night when, like, the Bush Tetras, when they did their first gig, and I was kind of screaming in a microphone at the side of the stage. I believe he was there that night because I think I spotted him. But I didn't meet him till years and decades later when my friend Gail Ann Dorsey was playing bass for him. And then
Dorsey.
She was the bass player for him for
yes, well, absolutely. No, God, I saw them on that sort of reality tour, and she was just extraordinary. And when she does that duet of Under Pressure with him, it's just mesmerizing. God, she was, and she was at Glastonbury in 2000 as well.
Yeah.
So then with your sort of musical journey then, so James Chance.
Mm-hmm.
So how important is James to the New York scene?
James was really pivotal in No Wave because a lot of the no wave bands, they weren't as physically charismatic as he was. There were only a few, like Lydia Lunch, James Chance, and Alan Vega of Suicide were all incredible, and Richard Hell, who was kind of a crossover between punk and no wave. They were incredibly charismatic front people, very physical, very dynamic. And a lot of the no wave bands would just stand there like stony faced and play and scream like they were having schizophrenic breaks. But James there was something about him that was just extremely compelling. Like when we started playing in the Contortions, we would do a set and then Max's Kansas City would have to clear the entire club because there would be a line of people waiting to come in to see us do a second set. And we hadn't planned a second set, but the crowd was so voracious for us. It was pretty wild, but also it had to do with the antics that were happening on stage, because James would often jump into the audience while the band was playing. And let's say that you were sitting in the audience with a woman who was your girlfriend, and he would grab the girlfriend and try to kiss her. And then you, the man, would just push him away. And then there would be fisticuffs happening in front of the stage between James and this guy. Yes. And then George, the bass player, and I would leap from our instruments down to try to protect him. And there would be a brawl going on in front of the stage in the audience, and the band would keep playing. So, word traveled about this insanity, this theater that was happening. And that brought people in as well.
Yes. But, and what was the dynamics with you? What was the dynamics like with you in the band? Did you sort of, looking back on it, was it generally okay, or was it quite difficult?
It was generally okay in the beginning, but when Anya Phillips started to manage the band, it got very difficult. Not only for me, but everyone, because she wanted James to be the star, which he already innately was, but she started paying the band members less as the shows were making more money. So people were getting disgruntled, And also I wanted to sing, and they allowed me to sing a song, an Aretha Franklin song that we did called Chain of Fools, a very fractured version of it. And it got a lot of attention, and that was something James didn't want, because he had to be the center of attention. Yes. So there was a little competition there. I was never asked to sing it twice. But, as things went on and the band was making less money and drugs were becoming more prevalent with certain people, it just kind of, I had to step away and pursue my own.
And were you sort of writing in diaries? How were you keeping all this kind of information? Because you've got some beautiful pictures in the book, but also just the amount of detail in the book as well is incredible. I just wondered, were you sort of making notes, or were you keeping some sort of record of all this that was happening?
I didn't keep a written record, actually, but I think that because that scene was just so absolutely dynamic and cinematic, really, because it kind of was like a fractured fairy tale living downtown at that moment, and with light and in darkness. That when I started to write the book, I could vividly recall so many scenes, and if there were details about dates or shows that I couldn't remember, did call, there were people that helped me. I would give Pat Place a call, or there's another fellow named Weasel Walter, he just catalogs everything. And he knew absolutely everything about every band member in the Contortions who came and went. And
Right.
so I did have help, I was grateful for the help that I got.
But with any scene that I've sort of been in, there's often quite a nice little honeymoon period. Then when you're young, you don't think it's going to change, but obviously you realise the honeymoon period is a bit like, yes, just one of those things. It's not going to last forever.
Yes.
When did you sort of find it becoming quite unpleasant? Was there a period where you started feeling like the creativity or the sort of positive side was becoming overshadowed by the darker elements of the community?
Yeah, I think that started to happen around 79, maybe, because drugs had really infiltrated the scene, and, people were changing because of the drugs. There was a darker aspect. There were, with the Contortions, there was some crazy racism that kind of came into it, and that made me very uncomfortable. And this, in a lot of ways, I don't believe that people were actually racists, but it was this kind of almost a teenage posturing to see how awful you could be.
Yes.
And
Well, I think, was it Sid who had that Belson was a gas slogan on his leather jacket? And the swastikas
exactly.
started to appear.
Yes, so it was the swastikas and the racism and it was just getting me down. I remember, well, when I started the Bloods with Kathy Ray, and we did our all-girl band, we opened for the Clash, and I remember the first night at Bonds. Oh God, well, what was the name of the hip hop band that opened for them? But there were a lot of punks in attendance that were like throwing racist epithets at the band, and
Oh dear.
it was just awful. And Joe Strummer was livid, because he was such a brilliant social justice warrior, and he couldn't believe what was going on.
Yes, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And
So
what was
I'm
it?
actually.
And you mentioned Sid and Nancy. Did you meet them in sort of in New York at this time?
Oh, well, I talk about that in the book. I did meet Sid Vicious after Nancy Spungen had been murdered, and he had just left jail. Nancy, I always avoided. If she showed up at a club, I would run in the other direction, because I just thought she was one of the most horrible human beings I'd ever met. And Sid was lovely. I mean, I guess by the time I met him, he was pretty broken from everything that had gone on with the murder and jail, and he had tried to commit suicide at that point. And it was very, very sad to see the state he was in when I saw him. He died several days after I met him.
I think he was a bit too fragile, really, for the whole rock and roll lifestyle. I think some people are just a lot more, they've got a resilience, and some people you just think, God, you're just a little bit gullible almost.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I don't think he murdered Nancy. I do not believe that it was him.
No.
But I think, I agree with you. I think that some people can live through tragedy and come out not completely unscathed, but live to tell the stories where others cannot.
Yes, and writers that were happening. You mentioned William Burroughs. Did he sort of become quite a pivotal character during that period in your life and later on?
He was pivotal to many in the scene, like Patti Smith. People like Patti Smith worshipped him. He was very well regarded by people like Jim Jarmusch and Lucy Sant and many others. And I was more enamored of his writing partner, Brian Geisen.
Right. Is that the picture of you two together in the book?
Yes.
With this, right, Brian.
Yes. But, and I think some people will probably take me to task for talking about Burroughs the way I did. I mean, the man did murder his wife.
Yes.
But he's thought of as a sacred cow. So to talk about him in any light that isn't very flattering, I'm probably going to catch a little hell for that, but it is what it is. I mean, there are things about his writing that I really admire, and then there are other things that I just about him that I can't tolerate. It's like Polanski. I love a Polanski film, but he was an awful human being.
Yes, this is true. It's like you have to. Yes, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Really, I mean, it's best not to know too much about people's personal stuff.
It really is.
But you do have to occasionally. I know it was just and just another character. I mean, because you mentioned so many characters in the book that are fascinating. Lizzie is one of those other people. What was so unique about Lizzie? Because she does this amazing version of Fire, doesn't she? I believe.
Yes.
So what was the sort of qualities of her that were so amazing?
There were a lot of brilliant women making unusual and exciting sounds with their instruments in those days. The women in Mars, the women in Lydia in Teenage Jesus, Pat Place, Julia Hayward, who's often been in the shadow of Laurie Anderson, who was very experimental with sound, a brilliant artist. But Lizzie Mercier she was beyond anything that I've encountered in terms of her musicianship and her imagination. She was so unique. How does a girl that grew up without a mother in Paris end up sounding like she's a Black woman in Soweto playing a guitar? I mean, I don't know how she did it, but she channeled something that was so elemental, and she had these rhythms that were very African in her blood.
Yes.
And she was an absolute idiosyncratic genius. I mean, I still listen to those records and marvel at her, because also just as a human being, she was so playful and so also someone that men didn't give a lot of credit to in terms of her creativity. Like Richard Hell has written about her, but he's always written about her as a girlfriend and not as an artist.
Right.
She was a brilliant artist, and unfortunately not given her due in her lifetime. And she died in poverty. She died young of cancer. And I needed to show, for me as her friend, I needed to show us, sides of her that were very tender and human, and in terms of her beauty, the music that came out of her, and who she was.
Because it's amazing, during this period, you're still only in your 20s, aren't you? When you sort of writing this, probably a few years ago, did that person that was you back then, did she seem quite different, or were you quite surprised of how much you've developed and grown during those decades?
I was pretty surprised. I mean, I was kind of a horrible little narcissist. It takes a lot to grow out of your ego. And part of that was bravery. And I have to feel not ashamed of myself for being as brave as I was and taking the risks that I took. I wasn't always wonderful to the people who cared for me. I could often be very, very self-sabotaging, but not great to people. But I also have so much gratitude for the people in my life then who taught me things, and who I need to honor. And in many ways, this book is a way of making amends for myself as well, and to people that I cared for, that I might have let down.
Yes.
But there were a lot of strange things that went on as well, where people would use people for what they could get out of them and exploit them. And I'm not just talking about myself, but I try to expose that as well.
Yes. It's amazing because I was just, again, you started acting as well in the late 70s and early 80s. I mean, that must have, things, it's just extraordinary how many things just sort of lined up like the sort of planets that you just slipped into sort of films. That was another kind of amazing chapter in the book. Did you, yes, looking back, was that kind of quite surreal thinking about that period as well?
It felt so natural at the time because we were all doing it. We all, it was so easy to pick up a Super 8 camera and, for $10, buy some reels of film. And people were always like, oh, let's make a movie and let's do this. And then we can play at Max's Kansas City one night and raise enough money to make the next installment of the movie, So it was all very DIY, do it yourself. And it didn't feel surreal at all. It just felt very, very natural at the time. But when I look back on it, one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book was because it was extraordinary for that to happen. I mean, how could that ever happen now? It could, because everybody has the technology in their hand to make films, but, and make really revolutionary work or political work or any type of artistic work, but people are more hypnotized by what they're watching as opposed to what they could be making.
Yes, I think we also had a bit more boredom back then, so it sometimes encouraged you to I don't know, go into those kind of quiet moments and then come out and do something. Where it's now we've always been very stimulated with 10 seconds of this and a clip here and a clip there. There's the attention span has really gone, which I think is probably a bit of a tricky one, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody else.
Yeah, me
actually.
too. Yeah, it's very hard to break the hypnotic scroll.
Yes, but you mentioned one of the film. Was it Lizzie Borden who was one of the filmmakers, and is she the one who directed the film, which is Born in Flames?
Yes.
So, could you just explain a bit more about that movie?
Born in Flames was. I mean, what surprises me about that film is how prescient and important it still feels to feminism and to women. We didn't know it at the time. We were just doing a guerrilla film, and Lizzie was very tenacious about getting it done. It was filmed over a period of a couple of years, like just here and there. And she had an idea that she wanted to make a film about a post socialist revolution America where socialism has still betrayed women. And what would women do if that were the case? And she made this on a shoestring budget. I think it probably cost altogether $40,000.
Right.
But that film today is still screening like in universities and cultural institutes, and it's a very important film for a lot of women in terms of being prescient about what's happening now. And funny enough, when I was playing this rabid Alex Jones kind of radio announcer who's like a left wing provocateur, just raging on the microphone in that film. But at one point, as the radio announcer, I say that the number on the dial to find the station is 2016. And that was the year that Trump got elected. And that was the year that the film got restored.
All right.
So that was an interesting little quirk of the film.
Yes.
I don't know why I came up with 2016. It was a little bit of a Cassandra moment, but it was a really powerful film also for bringing white women and Black women together, which was one of Lizzie's main imperatives, because second wave feminism, Black women were not included for the most part with the leadership of white second wave feminism. And she wanted to somehow make that apparent and try to bridge that gap as well.
Yes. Because on the next chapter, you talk, this is one that's called Dancing the Wild Step, actually. You talk about Rome 78 and sort
Yes.
of this partnership with James, but then you sort of reference or talk about sort of being the woman behind the man. What was that? What was that sort of relationship like and project?
James, I adore James, who is now Jamie Nares. And we lived together for a while during that period. And he was a he at the time, but she was living inside he. So I have to state that very clearly, and I knew that at the time as well. Working on brainstorming Rome 78, and I was kind of disappearing in the relationship because it was all about Rome 78, and I didn't feel. I felt like I was supporting something that I couldn't really be a part of. Inevitably, some things that happened during that film broke us up, but I think the film was absolutely brilliant. It's a comedy. Almost everyone downtown is in it, and I think she did a brilliant job with that film. I think it's one of the best of the downtown No Way films.
Yes, well, I'm going to have to check that out. That's good.
Yeah.
So then you leave New York for Berlin, 79.
Yes.
Yes, that was. I mean, in those days, I thought traveling was massive. Actually, you could just go to the post office and get a 1-year passport back in the 70s and 80s. Now it's so complicated. But yeah, so what took you to Berlin? Because I remember a friend's brother was in Berlin, and he explained that West Berlin, that's where people would go if they didn't want to sort of go into the army in Germany. So obviously, most people went, "Yep, that's good enough. We'll go to Berlin." So you got a lot of, alternative types and sort of people who just didn't want to sort of march around in uniform. So what took you to Berlin?
Well, it was actually 1978, early 1978. Scott and Beth B, the filmmakers, we were all friends, and they had arranged to go on a little tour of the Netherlands and to go to Berlin because they had met Martin Kippenberger, who had a club in Berlin, West Berlin at the time, called SO36. So they invited me to come in and play music as a solo artist, and I had my guitar and some backing tapes. And then Lydia Lunch's Teenage Jesus came along, so that was her trio. And Scott and Beth B showed their film Black Box,
Right.
which was and so that was the first time I journeyed to Berlin was with them, and I was very fortunate to meet through Martin Kippenberger people like Claudia Skoda, the designer, some brilliant painters like Rainer Fetisch, Salome, and Luciano Castelli, Tabea Blumenschein, who was the muse of Ulrike Oettinger, who was a filmmaker doing brilliant Fellini-esque movies in Berlin at the time, contemporary Rosa von Proheim. So what was happening in Berlin mirrored what was happening in New York a lot because painters, filmmakers, and musicians were all cross-collaborating like we were in New York, which made it very different again from London. So that was very exciting. And the Berlin Wall was still standing.
Well, quite. Did you sort of were you interested in the Weimar Republic and that music from the 20s and 30s in Berlin?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. I loved Weimar. I used to do a version of Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht, Pirate Jenny.
Right, from the Threepenny Opera.
Yes, exactly. I still sing that song sometimes when I perform. I did it probably about 5 years ago. I haven't sung it recently, but I love Weimar. I just thought it was a fascinating period of time and music and art and yeah.
Amazing. Because you mentioned you were sort of, when you left the Contortions, you played solo places like Tier 3 and Max's. So was that when you came back to New York after your Berlin trip?
Yes. I mean, we didn't stay in Berlin that long, but I did end up living in Rotterdam for probably a period of about 7 or 8 months, and also in Amsterdam for a bit.
My God. Were you picking up sort of also those sort of German artists? Was it Nina Hagen at that stage.
Nina Hagen, yeah. No, I didn't know Nina, but I loved her. And there was a German band, no wave band of women called Malaria.
Oh,
Have
yes.
you heard of them?
Yes, I have.
Yes.
They've been on my radar a lot.
Yeah. So I met Bettina, the singer, and Gudrun Gutz, who still is working in Berlin. I think she still has a radio show, but she makes music as well. And that was a brilliant band, Malaria.
Yes.
Very
God,
exciting.
it was kind of good. So then as the 80s progresses in the book then, so how do you navigate that next period? Because in this, in the UK, things change quite a lot from the 70s. We have Thatcher comes in, there's the Falkland War, the miners' strike, there's Greenham Common, there's that whole sort of anti-nuclear movement as well. A lot of women are doing the Reclaim the Night marches because there's so much violence towards women. So how do you navigate your early 80s?
I remember going back to New York, and I had spent a lot of time in London as well, hanging out with the Passions. You remember the band The Passions?
God, yes. Was that Barbara Coogan?
Barbara Gogan.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. I'm in love with a German film star.
Well, indeed.
Remember that song?
Yes.
Brilliant
God,
song.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So they were all good friends. And I spent some time in London in the early 80s, and I was like, there was some brilliant British pop music happening in the 1980s. Absolutely brilliant. Like mid 1980s, it started, And when I went back to New York, I had interest from Geffen Records. They wanted to sign me. And that's when I started working with Thomas Dolby. He produced my first single for Geffen Records. And
so was that was that the Bloods, or was that you as a solo artist?
That was me as a solo artist. This was after the Bloods had broken up.
Right.
And I was doing, solo shows, and was approached by an A&R man at Geffen about signing. So I was going back and forth between London and New York, and doing my bit, trying to write hit pop songs,
Yes.
And ended up, doing this single with Thomas, and then working on his album, The Flat Earth, which gave him his second biggest hit. Hyperactive was.
Well, quite. Yes, we remember Thomas very well. He went on to, I think he did work with Joni Mitchell a bit later on in the decade.
Yeah. No, he produced Lena Lovitch, and he very, very talented person, Thomas. I had a good time working with him.
Yeah, my God, this is just yes, you're like. But then you also meet the Au Pairs at this stage in the early 80s.
That was when I was with the Bloods. Yeah.
So that was before then.
Before this, yeah.
What was it like? Because obviously, 1980, John Lennon gets murdered in New York. Did that shift the cosmic energy of the city at that point?
I think it did a bit. I mean, I remember us hearing the news. I was with my bandmate Kathy, and we were in a bodega, and there was a lot of heroin around in New York at that moment when John got shot. And I remember us just being so, like, hearing it over the radio and just being devastated by the news. I don't know that it actually shifted anything. It did make people quite despondent. But yeah, I met the Au Pairs right around the time that the Bloods were in our heyday, really, because we had met in Berlin again at a festival for women, a music.
Right. Yes, that's
called Venus Weltklang. Yeah.
Yes. And then I think it's almost your last chapter. You sort of bring in. There's the picture of you and Thomas.
Oh yeah,
Lost and Found, and then Madonna appears in the book as well, doesn't she? Which is quite amazing.
Well, I mean, we weren't good friends, but we were friends, and we were contemporaries. And she was signed to Sire at the same time that I was signed to Geffen. I was out of the closet at that point as a gay woman. She was not. And the powers that be, I had a really hard time in the corporate music business because they didn't want me to be authentically who I am. And it was just, there's so many problems. I start to describe at the end of the book what happened and why I couldn't continue working with Thomas on my record, my album, because of some snafus that happened with Geffen Records,
Right.
which was very unfortunate because Tom and I worked really well together, and I did end up working with him again on his record. But that first record that Tom and I did together it just shot up the dance charts. So Geffen was anxious to get us in the studio, but Tom wouldn't work with Geffen, and that's a story in the book of why. But Madonna, her first single did not do well.
No.
So she got very catty with me, where we were friendly before. But she's a consummate performer, and who knew she was going to become the Queen of England?
Yes, well, absolutely. Did the sort of the mafia ever sort of come into the sort of the conversation or the sort of atmosphere of New York at that stage? Was there much corruption happening in this city?
There was a lot of corruption in the music business. There were a lot of men involved, like on the accounting side, on the management side, and inside the major labels. I don't want to name names, but the corruption was rife. And I can't talk too specifically about how or who.
No.
But yeah, it was definitely going on for sure.
So I think you had, was it Morris Levy? But I think he might have been more early 70s and 60s.
He was a little earlier. Yeah, Morris Levy.
Yes. So with the book, you take it up to, is it 1980 it finishes?
It finishes probably more in like around 1983, 84.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was sort of 8 years. Did it feel like at that point that was a nice closure for sort of finishing the book? Did it feel to you that that was an absolute chapter before your next project?
Well, yeah, because basically at the end of that time, I was actually getting sober as well. So, and sobriety really changed my life in very dramatic ways. Not doing drugs or alcohol anymore. It was just taking off a lot of veils and, kind of facing a past and dealing with some of the wreckage and some of the beauty and some of the ways that I had covered up any specific traumas or pain that I had through drugs and alcohol. Taking that away and having to reckon with it all was, to me, the ultimate closing of a chapter in my life.
Yes, well, it would be. Was that ACT UP that was also part of?
Yes, I was also involved in ACT UP at the time, and that was very profound. A very profound moment in the city, especially the St. Patrick's Cathedral action.
Yes.
That I write about in the book as well.
God, there's a lot, isn't there? There's a lot to digest in this book.
Yes.
It's amazing. How did it, I mean, you must have gone through an awful lot, and you've been very prolific with your books recently. I mean, I think you've had Sinead O'Connor, Patti LaBelle, Twist as well, and this one. I mean, it's been a very prolific 10 years.
Not even. I think I started publishing in, when was it, 2022? Yeah, my first book was published, Peter and the Wolves was published in 22.
Right, so that was even
I've been pumping them out.
Yeah.
I've been really... actually, the LaBelle book is about the trio LaBelle. It's about Patti, Nona Hendricks, Sarah Dash, because no one knew about them. And I felt, again, that they needed to be brought to the consciousness of music lovers who wouldn't, who are younger, who didn't have that experience. Right. Yeah.
Why LaBelle Matters. Oh, yes, I think I've got it somewhere, actually. I haven't got Peter and the Wolf. That's very hard to get hold of, isn't it?
Is it? Well, I can get you a copy.
That would be, I think so. I think it's like it just always has currently unavailable. And I think, oh, how rude. I don't know why, but...
I can get you a copy. Actually, I have some copies. I should probably put something up on my website about like
Yes.
if people wanted to, get a copy. I can
Because there was a
basically.
book that was somebody had from his diaries. I think his name was Duncan, somebody from New York. And I
Duncan
can't...
Hanna.
Yes.
That's a good book.
That is a
Yeah.
very good. I interviewed him actually, and then
Yeah.
God, that was such a shock. So I guess you read that one as well, or even met him.
I did. Yeah.
Was he a
Yeah.
lovely guy?
He was. I didn't know him well, but he was quite a dandy. He was always impeccably dressed, very handsome, lovely, lovely guy. And I didn't know him very well, but yeah, he was definitely around. Yeah.
And the 80s must have been quite weird because obviously the amount of people dying and destruction and you had all that, you mentioned Johnny Thunders in the book and various other members of the band, and then Andy Warhol dying a bit later on in the 80s, and it was just, it must have been a very odd decade to live through the 80s, which had so many great things, but at the time, if you were there, it must have been absolutely horrendous.
It wasn't. I mean, just like stepping in and out of shadow, there was also so much light and so much creativity and so much great art and music. And yes, a lot of people were leaving us, but they burned so brightly when they were here,
Yes.
And it's kind of like the tone that we need to seize upon to keep going is the light. Like, for instance, right now, and not to get into the weeds of politics, but we're in a very dark time right now. And the powers that be, with the Epstein stuff and the war and all of it, they really want us to feel in despair and in fear. And although it is true that we have to look at this and resist it and do whatever we can to fight against it, we also have to, within our own communities, seize on we can't let them take our joy away. We have to be able to hold on to the light, and that light is what we find in community, in resistance together, and whatever we can do not to feed into the despair, because that's the tone they want. We have to change the tone,
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. It's good. It's good to keep being reminded of that. I mean, I sort of feel a bit strange because, well, not completely strange, but just that thing of like, life is just generally all right day to day. But when you look at the news, and like tonight, the moon looked amazing because it's almost full, or it was full. The stars look incredible, and there's so many positive and nice things. But then you just constantly sort of see another interview with this person, and that person, and the news stories, and it just gets worse. But then it feels a bit surreal because almost you could just choose to tune out of the whole thing as well. But I don't think that's good. But at the same time, you don't want it to be too in your psyche and in your DNA. So you have to sort of balance it, don't you, really? But
well,
God,
exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like they're waging psychological warfare on us,
Yes.
And because we take in so much information through these screens all the time, I think we individually, we really have to parse how much of it we can stand without sinking into like despair or sleepless nights or anxiety, because we do have to be aware of it and do what we can. Like one of the things that I've been talking about with my community is divesting 1 day a week. Like on Fridays, no Amazon, no Google, no social media, and just none of it. Just don't do it on a Friday. Don't consume 1 day out of the week. If everybody could do that, because all they care about really is money. If we take that away from them, they're going to pay attention. It's just like what happened with I can't remember which, the parent company, Hulu. Hulu is the streaming service in America that was connected with the Jimmy Kimmel show,
right,
and whatever network was airing Jimmy Kimmel, and they wanted to take him off the air for saying truthful, horrible things about Donald Trump, and people just canceled Hulu. They canceled Disney Plus. They canceled the platforms that were supporting the people that wanted to take him off the air. And it worked.
Yes.
So if you pull out the money, they freak out.
They freak so much.
So maybe we can start doing that, like at least one day a week, and see how that goes for
Well, it's interesting because I did I don't know if you saw it, Woodstock 99, which is one of those kind of festivals of hell, and the lineup is just hideous. And it was like, why were the kids being so like them? And it's like, well, they were the generation that just had nothing to worry about. They had it easy. They didn't know it at the time. They probably might not thought about it. But then you think, there was just nothing to really be angry about. Whereas now, the 80s, I often say it was a bit grim, but the soundtrack was amazing. But the and the 90s is like, it was a bit tricky. I'm sure there was good stuff happening underneath the sort of the mainstream stuff. But you had all that Limp Bizkit and Marilyn Manson and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and all that kind of imagery and we had lad culture suddenly came to be so vile. It was like lad culture became so pornographic and so unpleasant about women. You're thinking, how did that happen? It started with Kurt Cobain and ended with Woodstock 99. It's like, I think when things get complacent, it just gets really like, oh no, people can't be bothered to vote, and you think, oh, please don't do that. You must vote. It's not good because it will lead to a situation we're in at the moment.
Yes. Well, how is the climate in England right now in terms of culture? I mean, are people rebelling? Are people doing punk bands again? What's going on over there?
Well, yes, that's a good question. I think, there is lots of culture. I mean, we're very good on festivals. We're very good on sort of events. It's it is as you know, because I think you were touring last time when you were doing some book readings. It's a tiny place, and there's great communities in every city, and there's an alternative scene, and there's a anarchist scene, and there is a lot of things going on. It's just that we have the Reform Party, and they're very good at getting the message over that just makes people who feel sort of not very in power to vote for somebody that they think will help them, but that like they aren't going to help you. They'll just get even richer. They don't care about you. You know what I mean? It's like, oh God, and to be honest, our government at the moment has been such a disappointment, unfortunately. I thought great, and it's like, oh God, they being a politician is quite skillful, and you have a president who's brilliant at getting the message and getting the votes, and most people, especially from my position, which is the left, are very good at not being able to do those things. So it's all very frustrating at times, if I was to be honest. They're just not good at tapping into that thing that people want to hear and believe in, and picking up the sentiment of a lot of the population, really. So it's like we were saying, it's best sometimes to have a day off the news, really, and then sort of just have a look at the headlines. Oh dear, that's not good. I might give that a miss. Or like, oh my God, I didn't see that one come in. This week has topped it all, hasn't it, really?
Oh, it really has. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to be over there in April, so.
Oh, are you? Are you doing a book?
Just a wee thing. I'm going to do the Walthamston Rock and Roll Book Club, I think it's called.
Oh, yes. He's always. Is that Terry?
I don't know the person. My publisher at Faber is setting it up for me.
Oh, yes, because he's always sending me, oh, you must get in touch with so-and-so, and they have such a good lineup of people.
Yeah, so I'm going to do that. I don't know the date yet. Sometime I'm coming over around the 10th of April. But I'm also doing a place called, have you heard of Forma? Forma is kind of like a new cultural place that does films and art and all kinds of things. So I'm going to do a screening of Born in Flames.
Oh, excellent.
And a book reading. And so if you're around, I'll send you an email with all the dates.
Yes, do give us some dates.
Yeah.
So it is funny because we're coming to America from something like the 4th to the 14th, or 2 weeks, and sort of going around the Death Valley, Grand Canyon, and those sort of places.
Oh, wow. Oh, so, do it now before the country closes down.
Yes, well, this is. I know. When we booked, it all seemed like such a, it should be all right, and it's like, oh my God, 4 weeks before, and you're thinking,
Right.
God, who knows?
Yeah.
Will we
Yeah.
get through security? It'll be a
When
mystery.
exactly. When are you supposed to come over?
About the 4th of April, 6th.
Oh gosh. Okay. I hope I don't miss you.
Well,
I
no,
mean,
well, we'll see, but it will be around then, so hopefully we'll be able
mhm.
to get through customs okay.
Oh
But
yeah. I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
I know it'll be very interesting to see what the place is like, but we'll get a snapshot of it.
Well, the natural beauty is just it's breathtaking.
Well,
It's
we always love the national parks in that area.
yeah.
So, and you've got a lot of musicians and artists who live around the Joshua Tree, because I've done quite a lot of interviews with people around
Yes.
there. So
Yes.
it's
Joshua
quite
Tree is
nice.
excellent
I'm
too.
sure they're sort of sticking to the countryside and the open spaces. I think if you can see the stars and the galaxy, you feel like it's going to be all right, really.
Yes, and there's no better place to see the stars than in Joshua Tree.
Mm.
It's stunning because there's hardly any city light, so it's magnificent. You're just looking up at a blanket of stars. It's
I
really
know it kind of
yeah,
gives you that Milky Way. Just always blows my mind. So look,
yeah.
after this incredible publication, what's your next project that you're thinking of working on once this is
Wow.
done?
Well, I did the 33 and a third book
Yes.
on Universal Mother. And when I started to discover things about Sinead O'Connor that were just amazing, that people just haven't talked about. And I pitched a biography to my publisher at Beacon Press, and I'm going to be writing a full-length biography about Sinead.
Oh, fantastic!
So, yeah, so that's the
God.
next. That's
Well,
the
she was
next.
very much there in the 80s, wasn't she? And other decades. But I mean, because it was kind of interesting in the 80s, because you mentioned the Slits, and there was there was the Marine Girls and the Dolly Mixture, and a band called the Modettes, who were very
Yes.
good as well. They were brilliant. And I did an interview with one of them, members of them, a few weeks ago, who was really
Mm.
good.
Mhm.
And then we sort of there was this brilliant moment where there was like Sinead O'Connor, Tracy Chapman, Suzanne Vega, these kind of incredible singer-songwriters. Michelle Shocked as well was the other one who, I mean, it was just really nice because there was a production sound in the 80s, which I found, the mainstream was quite hard work, that
Mhm.
very sort of overproduced sound. But then they came along and it was just glorious, actually.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of strong women on the radio in the 90s. People like Queen Latifah, you could hear her on pop radio.
Yes.
Songs like Unity or Tori Amos or Alanis Morissette and Tracy and Chapman and all these other women. And then Bill Clinton passed something called the Telecommunications Act. I think it was 1995, which consolidated all the radio stations in America under one big umbrella. And guess what? Poof! All those women, the women who had strong voices off the radio, gone. Something really shifted in the 90s. Like you didn't hear those voices anymore, on the radio.
Oh,
So isn't that
dear.
interesting? I mean, social engineering is a thing. The patriarchy does not want women to succeed. They don't want us to be equal,
No,
because they're too
they
afraid that
want you to have babies and be at home.
that's right. They're too afraid that we're going to surpass them,
I know.
which at some point, hopefully we will.
We keep getting told, like white men are sort of going to become extinct. You think, yeah, I
Yes.
don't. That's a horrible.
That's their fear, that they're going to become
It's all a bit
extinct.
like the Handmaid's Tale, isn't it? It's kind of
Yes. Yeah.
it's frighteningly horrible and grim.
Yes.
Jesus.
I know. I know. It's
Anyway,
terrible.
look, yes, give us the dates. That would be amazing, and hopefully we'll be able to see you in one of these venues. But
Oh,
look,
that'd be
thank you ever
great.
so much for your time, and
Well,
I'll
thank
look
you,
forward to the
David.
audio book as well.
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's every 4 or 5 years.
Yes, this is true. This is good. Anyway, look, have a lovely day and
Thank you.
take care. And yeah,
You too.
thanks again for the book. It's amazing.
And
Okay,
thank you. I'll be in touch.
take
Okay.
care. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.
And that was me in conversation with Adele Bertei, talking about the new book that has just been published, No New York, a memoir of No Wave and the Women Who Shaped the Scene. Available from all good bookshops. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. Have a great week. Stay safe.